What gives you hope for the children and families of Midland and Odessa?
Midland, despite some of the naysayers, is really there to build the Midland community, to build up the quality of life. I think there's a lot of support for it, and I think the time is right just to go out and kind of create that quality of life. And for each of the nonprofits that we've been talking about, I think the support is there. Midland is ready to cultivate that and grow that. So I think it'll be a great place to live and work and just see the change that's going to happen in the next few years.
Hi, my name is Jessica McCoy, and I'm your host here at Raising Midland, a podcast for Native Midlanders and Midland transplants who want to know what's going on around town regarding what to do with your children and family. So I have two wonderful people here from the Museum of the Southwest. I have Jana Hosinger, who's the president of the board, and I also have Rebecca Mina, who is the children's director of the Children's Museum. Bet you didn't know we had a children's museum in Midland. We do. We'll get right into it. Hi, ladies. How's it going?
Hi.
Doing good. How are
Welcome.
you?
I know.
Thank you.
It's very formal, but don't worry. We'll warm up. It'll all be easy. All right, cool. So we were getting to know each other a little bit over the last couple minutes, just trying to give you the gist of all my goals for this podcast. And one of the things that I think is important for people to know is that we have a museum here in Midland. We have a lot of them, actually. But a lot of people don't really know what the Museum of the Southwest is about. So at least I would assume so if they're not from the area. I feel like if you're a native Midlander, you probably do. So let's pretend that you've never heard anything about the Museum of the Southwest. How would you describe it? Janet, you want to go first?
I would say the Museum of the Southwest is a multidisciplinary institution that consists of a art museum, world class at that, a children's museum, a planetarium, and it is also a historic mansion.
Ooh.
And the emblem logo for the museum has kind of like four elements to it, and each of those represent kind of like the four pieces of the museum.
Very cool.
It can be somewhat of an identity crisis because we have so much.
Because you do so much. You're a
Yeah,
Renaissance
we do so
museum.
but that also we have something for everyone. We have something for the kids, the little kids.
Wow.
The science and planetarium, the art museum, which truly is for all ages.
Wow.
And then just a historic mansion that is incredibly beautiful. I think I don't get to work there every day, but Rebecca does. And to work in a beautiful historic mansion is a fun way to spend your day.
We're going to get into like all the different elements of that because there's so much to break down with the museum. And I think maybe that's what people don't know is that there is really something for everyone. And there's so much programming that goes on throughout the year that I feel like engages so many different families. So before we do that, Rebecca, like you want to give a high level overview of what the Children's Museum is, like what is in the museum and what do you guys do to engage children?
So we have a rotating exhibit area,
Cool.
but what we like to focus on, and this has been a learning experience because I've only been there 2 years. I was a classroom teacher before. So what I have learned in the process of bringing these exhibits in is I don't want it to just look cool. I want it to be something that engages not just kids, the families as well. That's very important to me that they play together. And that's one thing that I like about the museum is because there's something for everyone. So if you're an art lover, or if you, like you said, love the science and the planetarium, the kids museum, you can go around to all the spaces and enjoy that with your family. We have in the children's museum, we have a Chevron maker space,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a classroom area. So we open it up in the summer and it just makes our space a little bigger. But during the school year, our education manager, Twee Garcia, will hold art classes for even as young as 0. So,
Wow.
yeah, well, babies
Yeah.
and mothers, they do a mommy and me. So it's kind of an interactive art activity that they can do together. And then she does special classes with our Girl Scout groups, our homeschool groups. That way, they can call her up and say, I need this badge or that badge, and she'll plan a class with them. And one thing that I really like that she does and our field trip manager does, they encourage the kids to visit more than just the children's museum.
Okay.
So our space is amazing. It's wonderful. It's my favorite, obviously. But I really love how they bring our littles over to the art museum
Nice.
because that is not exposure that I had when I was a child. So, you don't know how to interact with the art.
Right.
You don't know how to step back and study it. And she is amazing at guiding them through it. And it
Mhm.
makes them feel comfortable in that space when sometimes little ones may not. So I like that.
I really appreciate that. So, maybe Jana, you can talk about this. I'm assuming on the board, you guys talk about how to create these synergistic, what a corporate word I'm using, but creating synergy amongst all the different exhibits in
Mhm.
different areas in the museum. Like that must have taken a lot of strategic communication in how can we encourage everyone to interact with the music? Well, like I know that you guys used to have music classes there and like Septemberfest and engaging people that might go to those special events into the exhibits and then also into the children's museum. There's just so much communication. How does your board foster that level of communication, not only amongst the employees, but the
Mhm.
overall goal of your patrons? Loaded
That
question.
that is yeah, that's a good question.
I'll take a
Um,
lifeline, Trebek, for 500.
yeah, we rely on our, the directors of each of the museums, the
Mhm.
children's museum director who we have here with us, Rebecca, our planetarium director, um, and then the curator at the museum, which is currently vacant, but when he was there and
Mhm.
kind of we would bring them into the board or
Mhm.
into our board meetings to tell us kind of like what they were doing, what they were planning, to talk about uh, kind of bringing the three together. And that's something that we have a great staff right now. They're incredible. So it's actually not that much work on us
Mhm.
because they're doing it.
That's so nice. When you
And
have
I
the
know
experts and you're just like, go do your thing. Tell me how
exactly.
it
Yeah.
goes.
So it's pretty easy. But that's something that the planetarium and the children's museum did very well together. And they would purposely they would do art classes in the planetarium and do STEM related stuff in the children's museum
Very cool.
to get that crossover and make sure, get people who might not already be going to the children's museum but
Mm.
did go to the planetarium, get them over to the children's museum and vice versa.
Wow. I
Um,
mean, it seems like it's pretty difficult. Like, I don't know. That's intimidating to me because I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of moving parts.
Mhm.
Y'all must have a very wonderful team. And it sounds like you do
um,
that really works really well together. So what's the going ons of like running a children's museum and running a museum? Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? I mean, you probably have something new every day, right?
I kinda just show up and play. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like work sometimes.
Mhm.
So, a lot of it is communication. Like you were saying, we're trusted to communicate
Mm.
at our level, so we have to know what's going on in each building so we can plan to take the kids over to the art museum, or, they can plan a show that coordinates with something we're doing in our space.
Mhm.
And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. We also have to keep up with the maintenance and the needs,
Yes, it's a
all
big
of
part,
the
huh?
Yes, definitely.
Especially with children. They all
Yes.
have jam hands, like touching everything. How difficult is it to keep children from touching the art?
so some of the art you actually get to touch,
Yes.
and
What? Tell me about that.
there is a hot pink bench right now in the art museum and it's got colorful uh cushions on it.
Oh, nice.
And it is meant to be touched. It kind of looks like a slide. So I took my son there, my 4-year-old son, the other day, and it's not a slide, it's a bench. But the first thing he ran up to and he goes, a slide. And
It's
he
so cool how kids
climbed
like
on backwards and like slid down.
wow, it's
Um,
interesting to take children to art museums because they view art so differently. I might see something that you may not see, or vice versa, right? How does the museum go about creating engaging experiences for children when it comes to the art museum, the planetarium, or the children's museum? Do you guys plan out like lesson plans that you guys have to walk through, or do you have a little bit of something, a little bit of information about a piece and then you explain it to them and then the kids have to like do an activity with it? Like how do you gain inspiration for engaging your children into the exhibits?
Well, we do have lesson plans, but that's something that we're able to use more in our outreach
Mhm.
programs, when we go into the schools. But for example, last year when I was tasked with bringing, I believe it was second grade, through the art museum.
That's a tricky age.
It is a tricky age, and I am not always the best person to guide them through the art museum because I'm often told to lower my voice and all these things. But what was fun about it is we were able to go in and the kids sat around the one of the big art pieces and they each drew. I said, "What's the first thing you see? What's the first thing you notice?" And everyone noticed something different and they start
Wow.
sketching it out. And then I said, "Okay, what's the second thing you notice?" And you are able to take all of their sketches that they composed and they were showing them to each other. And of course, it was all about perspective. And so that was a bigger discussion
It's
that
a
they were
great
able to
lesson.
have. Yeah,
We all have different perspectives.
definitely. And
Wow.
it was interesting because some focused on color, some focused what they were nearer to. But it was really neat to see them discussing with each other. There was no right or wrong. It's just like, oh cool, I didn't see that. So that was the fun part of taking them through the art museum.
That's really neat. So it sounds like you make art engaging by breaking down how they can reflect upon it themselves. So for instance, like showing the fact like it's one thing to like have a child write down what they saw in a painting, right? It's another for that child to turn to their peers and say, "Hey, what did you think about this?" Right?
Yes.
That's an overall like larger message, I feel like that's important for all children to learn, right? Like we all have different perspectives. We should all appreciate how we view things in the world. That's very interesting. I think that's fascinating. So what I'm hearing you say is that the museum is really interactive with their art.
Mhm.
And you were talking previously, Jana, about the big couch slide
Yeah.
situation. That sounds like really fun. So, in my head, I'm thinking a planetarium. What does that look like? Is that a giant telescope? I'm just curious to see how do you make the planetarium engaging? When it's like, 90 degrees outside and the sun's outside, is it just a place where there's AC or like, how can you get kids engaged in space?
Well, for the parents, it is
I know.
inside in the
I'm gonna be
AC.
honest with you. That was my first impression when it was so hot outside. I took my kids to the planetarium, and I was like, that was tongue in cheek of me to say, but also it has got a great AC
Yes,
because it's
and
very chilly. It's so nice when it's like
a
110
dark room,
degrees.
you can kind of zone out a little bit. There has
Yeah.
been snoring heard
No
from
way.
the planetarium. But I think our planetarium director, David, does an amazing job in his shows of engaging the kids. He starts out with a star talk and puts the stars up on the dome. Um, and kind of like talks about what you can see. It shows everybody knows the Big Dipper. So he goes to the Big Dipper first and then shows you like where the North Star is so that you can actually
Wow.
then go, find it that night with your parents. So then that's kids have done that. They're like, "Mom, I want to go out tonight." So it might lead you to keeping your kids up later when the sun is actually down and
It's like
you can see the
8
stars.
o'clock at night. Mom, I have to see the stars today because I went to the
Mm.
museum and I absolutely have to see what they were talking about. That is so neat. Very
And
cool.
he does just such a good job of there's an event coming up within the next year. They don't know exactly when, but and he'll zoom in and show you it's 3,000 light years away.
I
Um,
cannot comprehend what that
and
actually is.
I know so that means this event happened 3,000 years ago, and it took that long for the light to get to us. So when we see it sometime in the next year, it was 3,000 years ago when and David will like to tell you this because his name is David, and it was King David was in rule. The King David from the Bible was in
That's
rule at the
wild.
time that this event happened.
That's
Um,
wild.
but yeah, so to see it, I think on the dome to kind of like understand what it is and what's happening, and then to know you have to pay a little bit of attention because it'll happen sometime in the next um year.
Sometime.
One of my questions that I wanted to ask you guys was there's so many free resources within our community. Okay. You have the library, you have, you know, different like parks that you can go to, like the Centennial Park. My kids lovingly call it the Choo Choo Park because there's there's like little trains and it's super fun. Um, where they can run their trains on the big logs outside and like it's just super fun. But what differentiates the Museum of the Southwest and why would a parent choose to go there? I see the value, but like for somebody who doesn't know, why would somebody choose to spend some money to go either become a member or to join the Children's Museum?
Well, I think that they should do all of it.
I agree.
They really do because we have so many wonderful nonprofits, and that's been something that's been my focus this year is working more with the nonprofits in our area and helping promote the cool things that they're doing. So I think you should go to the library, you should go to the Petroleum Museum, you should definitely go to Sibley. There's so many cool things to do,
Mhm.
and each space has something different to offer.
Ooh, that's a really good point. So for the people that say that there's nothing to do in Midland,
There's a lot.
how about you just do all of it,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
Go take a walk on the Sibley Nature Trail.
Yes, and they have oh my gosh, they do
Go to
so
the
many
Children's
cool
Museum.
things. Yes, they have the hikes with homeless pets over at Sibley, and then they have family science nights. There's
That's
a big one
nice.
coming up at the Petroleum Museum. And yes,
Wow.
it's amazing, and that's something that I'm actually going to work and take things out to and help them with that. So that's what we've been doing is forming our community. And
Wow.
I think it's more important that you tell your parents and the kids all the cool things that are going on because they should do all of it. We all offer something different. And the bookmobile, the mobile library, they come once a month to our space and
Wow.
they lead the Saturday story time.
Oh, wow. When does that take place?
That's every Saturday at 11.
Okay, every Saturday at
Yes,
11. And is that in the Children's Museum or
it
is that
is.
in the bigger museum?
It's in the Children's
Okay.
Museum, and then they come out once a month to lead that. So
Oh,
that schedule is
wow.
on our events calendar.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It really sounds like the Museum of the Southwest has connected with other organizations within our community to not only support their efforts,
Mhm.
but to really nearly make it impossible for people to say that there's nothing to do here. So,
Yes.
how do people find out about things that are going on with the Museum of the Southwest? Can they go to your website? Do y'all have
Yes.
social
Yes.
media?
Yes, all of the above. So to find out about our
Hmm.
events, we have an events calendar on our website
Hmm.
and pretty regular posts on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
So those are good places to find that information. And if you're looking for community information, we usually have that at the Children's Museum front desk. We have flyers for Sibley and the library and things that we find out that are cool because what I've learned in my brief time here is there's a lot of word of mouth. A
Yes.
lot, and, like I say, it's finding where you fit in Midland. You know, we're not competing, we should support each other because as we're, building that strong community, that sets such a good example, but Midland is a lot of families and kids,
A lot. Did
a
you know
lot.
that there were like nearly 250 children that were born in September?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
we're interviewing Steve Bowerman, the president of the Midland Memorial Hospital, and he was saying that in the last is it August and September was they had like the most amount of babies born. So in my head, I'm thinking that's going to be increasing schools
Mhm.
like population, so making the bond even more
which we've
important.
heard a lot about and is
I know, and
very
that's a hot,
important.
hot button topic that I'm probably gonna get roasted on the internet for. Just go ahead, bring it, trolls. It's okay. But all that to be said, like it's things I'm really big on talking about the elephant in the room because we need to have these real conversations because if you guys are actually creating things for our community and there's still people that are saying that there's nothing to be done, they're not trying that hard to find out the information. There's always the squeaky wheel always gets the most grease, right? Is that what they say? The loudest voice is usually the one who everyone listens to. And I truly believe that there's so many wonderful things for us to be able to do as families and people who have small children. I mean, you were saying you have a 4-year-old. Like I have a 6-year old and a nearly 4-year old. During 2020, I thought I was going to go insane because I was stuck in my house. And I'm just so curious. Like, did you guys see any sort of negative effects with isolating, where parents were isolating for so long? It's almost like people are shy now to go get back in their community. Have you guys seen that?
Yes.
Absolutely, on so many different levels, and I think just on the board level, we
Hmm.
had Zoom meetings. It was so much harder to engage on a Zoom meeting, and then but then we also got so comfortable doing it. It was so easy
Mhm.
Yeah.
to log in. You didn't have to drive over or any of that, and then we went through the when we did start to have the in-person ones, then you had the, like, "Oh, but it was so much more convenient to do it
Mhm.
this way," and I feel like we are just now coming out of that and kinda, like, recovering from the effects of COVID.
Well, look at like,
Uh,
I mean, I think Amazon recently put out their press release like last week talking about how they're bringing people back into the office. And then there's some organizations, I saw one press release, I can't remember the company, so please forgive me, but they were saying our our employees are not children. They don't need to be monitored. So we'll allow them to work from home. Whereas Amazon is saying everyone back in the office. Being a parent right now is such a complicated thing because of some of us do have to be in the office. Some of us have remote options. I know several oil and gas companies that have a required amount of hours that they have to be in the office, and then they have some hours where they can be remote, right? But I have personally noticed, just being a parent myself, is that because of that shift, people have so much unexpectedness within their schedule because they're not sure what's expected of them from their employer, because their employer is really unsure about, do we need to be here or do we need to be in person? And I think that's almost negatively impacted people socially. And my interactions with museums is to create community.
Yes.
I mean, you guys had the farmers market for so many years in the parking lot. Is that still happening?
So the farmers market is still happening, but it's not at the museum, which that
Okay.
was the farmers market was never a
Museum event.
museum event. We were
But
just the
vessel?
the venue that they
Venue?
chose for it.
But isn't
Uh,
it great though that the museum could be a place for rebuilding that sense of community that I think everyone lost during the pandemic and then a couple years after? What are some other activities that you guys do, just programming wise, like Septemberfest? If I wasn't in from Midland, or if I was moving from Houston, what is Septemberfest and why is it so essential to the museum?
well, it's the longest running fundraiser for the museum. I think we were on year 55, I
Wow.
believe, for
So,
Septemberfest. And I'll plug Rebecca and her tremendous work on it. And she brought in, I don't know, how many, 12
a
or
lot.
more different communities from around Midland.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
So I think Petroleum Museum was there.
Oh, wow. So you had all the different
Yeah, Midland
nonprofits there?
College. Yeah, all the different nonprofits kind of had each had their little
Wow.
Kinderfest activity
Wow.
happening.
Yes.
So
Tell
it
me more about that. Like
yeah.
what was that like? Like in my head, what I'm imagining, if for people who don't know, Septemberfest is a series, like it's this giant event, and it's incredible because I don't know, everyone in Midland knows about it, or
Mhm.
you've at least seen a flyer for it or a social media post. And it's a huge event, and it just seems so quintessential Midland. So it seems like you really took that to heart by encouraging these other nonprofits to be present. How did you do that? What did that look like?
Well, I think what we recognize this year is the need to really bring in families and kids a little more, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
a huge art event.
Hmm.
But we wanted to really intentionally plan something for the kids, and all our friends showed up. So if I could just start on one side, we had the ECISD mobile STEM bus came.
They have a mobile STEM
They
bus.
do.
Okay, I'm immediately thinking the Magic School Bus.
It was a big grant.
Wow, that is
Yes.
so cool.
And so I did kind of a proposal, a write up, and they're awesome.
Wow.
They brought that out. They brought out telescopes. They brought out tables of activities and free books. And then we had the UTPB Makerspace came, and they brought out 3D printers and
Whoa.
laser engravers. Midland ISD, their whole preschool program. The ladies
Wow.
came out and they represented. We had Petroleum Museum and they were doing fire coasters. So they're
Oh, wow.
they're lighting things on fire. So
I bet the fire department loved that. They were like, all right, we got to see some action now.
and we would have had them there too, but they couldn't
Right,
park.
right.
Like
That's so
everyone
cool.
showed up. And
So many people showed up.
oh yeah, the Midland County Library was there. Peeps and Creeps came and
What
they
is
brought
that?
out Peeps and Creeps is a nonprofit arm of A to Z Vet. So they are actually a wildlife rescue and rehab center. Yes, it's
So
an
literally
amazing.
like birds and creepy
Yes.
crawlers.
Yes. And they had rabbits and they
That's
had
genius marketing.
a skunk. I mean, all
A skunk?
these.
Did
there
it
was a
spray you?
skunk.
No.
I know every person that walked up said, "So, like, how are you going to keep it from spraying?"
Oh my
And apparently,
gosh.
you remove the sprayer.
Yes.
That's a thing.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Wow.
It's-
I would I'm so curious what a real skunk looks like in real
It's
life.
adorable.
It's
So,
really
but that's
adorable.
like a legit question. Like you're exposing children to things that they would not be normally exposed to.
Yes, there was, let
That
me
is so cool.
Texas Parks and Wildlife came out. PBS, Basin PBS was
Yeah.
there, and we had our amazing Bells volunteers.
Wow.
We had such a it was huge. It was community, it was families and kids, and
And diverse.
it
That
was.
really honestly is just all encompassing to what Midland is. I feel like when I first moved here, I want to say my husband will fact check me on this, either 8 or 9 years ago. And I remember being like, what is out here? And like, no offense, I didn't know. Because I was thinking wasn't moving for oil and gas. I was taking a shot and seeing what it would be like to move in a different city. And I have been so year after year surprised about the people, the amount of people that are here, the different types of people. It's almost attuned that I would assume to what it would feel like to live on a Navy base or like an Army base because there's so many people from all different parts of the world because oil and gas is everywhere, right? One of my next door neighbors is really good friends with a ton of Canadians that came down for Conoco. Like they all moved down here. And then there's some people, like I have a really good customer of mine who's from Nigeria and her son, like, and her daughter are over at Trinity. Like, and I know some people from Algeria now, from Abu Dhabi, like Australia. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really prepared for that when I moved here. I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought, oh, okay, it's a West Texas town that my husband is from, and he was born and raised here. My in-laws have lived here for 40 plus years. I don't know what to expect. And I wish I would have had more of an open mind because your museum really encompasses all of that, right? There's so many different vast interests. But to go back onto the school part, it sounded like you had a lot of like you had ESD there, EISD, excuse me. You also Ector County ISD, and then you had Midland ISD there too.
Mhm.
So I'm so curious. Just I don't know how museums work. So do, does the do all the schools in Midland and in Odessa and the surrounding areas do they have access to the museum?
They do.
How do you guys incorporate the museum in with their education
Well,
or vice versa?
it's interesting. So circling back to Septemberfest, the
Right.
way it came about was these are organizations that we have worked with through the year.
Mhm.
We have Family Science Night, and then there's festivals over at Sibley. So these
Mhm.
are friends that we're making throughout the year.
Mhm.
And then when we hear someone doing good in the community, Fix West Texas was out there representing their, organization. When we hear somebody doing these wonderful things in the community, I want to celebrate that. I want to bring them in and do what we can to show our community what's out there. MISD has been really supportive of our new outreach program that we're doing. So, as I was a teacher, I'm able to pop back in the classroom and do these different types of projects. But it's funny because several of the women that were my support system are now over in MISD.
Oh,
So, seeing those familiar faces and
that's
saying, yeah,
cool.
it's exciting. So it's still a community.
That's awesome. So it really sounds like there's a lot of just connectedness
Mhm.
because of the spirit of what Midland is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, not being from here myself, I feel like there's this underlying spirit of wanting to help others,
Mhm.
specifically within our community. I think that is what makes Midland different. And one of the things I can objectively look at as somebody who's not born and raised here, as that is what makes it work, is that everyone is consistently promoting one another and the different endeavors that better our community. So that's great.
Mm.
That's wonderful.
This is a great opportunity to fact check me on this, but I know Midland has the most nonprofits per capita or the most
Wow.
nonprofits per something kind of, I think nationwide. It's a
That's
there are
right.
a
That's
lot of
crazy. I didn't know
nonprofits
that.
here.
That
And I
doesn't
think that
surprise
that
me.
goes to the Midland mentality that
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who give a lot to support that number of nonprofits. And it's really incredible. And
I
I
don't
think
think
that goes to the people here.
I agree. I don't think I've ever been in a town that has so many nonprofits that support different things specifically related to women and children. I mean, you look at Midland Fair Havens, you look at Safe Place of Midland. I mean, you look at things as simple as MCRC. I mean, that's to say that they're simple is
No.
way of an understatement. They are a highly complex organization, but they serve children at the end of the day. And, organizations like Safe Place serve women who are escaping domestic violence. It's truly what the spirit of Midland is how can we make this better for the future?
Mhm.
So it's always so surprising to me that people have different opinions if they've never lived here. You know what I mean? Okay, the last question that I have for you guys is what gives you hope for our community? Like moving forward, what gives you hope for the children and families of Midland and Odessa?
I think this kind of the perfect follow-up to the previous
Yes.
conversation we were just having, that the giving of Midland. And I think our time, like at this point in time after COVID, I think we really are like in that recovering from it. And I think Midland, despite some of the naysayers, is really there to to build the Midland community, to build up the quality of life. I think there's a lot of support for it, and I think the time is right for um, just to go out and kind of create that quality of life. And for each of the nonprofits that we've been talking about, I think the support is there, and I think Midland is ready to cultivate that and grow that. So I think it'll be a great place to live and work and just see the change that's going to happen in the next few years.
I agree. I feel like things have changed so much, and I've been kind of reflecting on some of the interviews that we've done so far. I'm trying to think what is the underlying thread because there's a very common message. Things are changing, and I'm not really big on creating a proverbial like positive message that really doesn't stick. But I truly believe that things are changing because there's a different generation coming along. Previous generations have been overly generous with their time and their efforts and their finances, obviously. That's what built the foundation. But now it's for parents that are actually in the thick of it in their parenting and maybe a step out, maybe they're empty nesters. They are really making huge moves to really make this community feel more like a community. And I think it's all happening because of perspective, because of what happened in 2020. Sometimes you don't realize what you had until you don't have it. So I think there's more of a concerted effort that most people are making now to really rebuild that community. And I appreciate you guys coming on here and discussing how the Museum of the Southwest is doing that for our locals. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
You're
you.
Great.
having